A more personable and amiable person you will not meet, and he has a very interesting subject and has done very interesting research on it. He received his master's degree in instructional systems from Florida State University and a PhD on instructional technology from Utah State, where he also worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Open and Sustainable Learning. He is now an assistant professor at Yildirim Beyazıt University in Ankara. He's been an advisor to the Board of Higher Education of Turkey. He is the Director of Education Policy Research at the SİTA Foundation in Ankara, and I invite you to examine that on its website. And he is a columnist for the Star Daily, a high-circulation Turkish newspaper. He's been with us since last September, and he will be with us until next September, carrying out an interesting study of California and American higher education as they relate to massification of higher education in Turkey. Bekir.
I would like to start by thanking both Carol and Judd, and also the Matrix and the Center for Studies for Middle Eastern Studies, as well as the Center for Studies in Higher Education. Perhaps it would be correct to just start with a small correction. I am no longer a columnist. I was a columnist until a few months ago. So I am just focusing on my research, and I am having a great time at Berkeley, and I am learning a lot. So today I would like to just focus on the last decade of Turkish higher education, because in the last decade, our system has expanded incredibly, very rapidly, and I would like to share that story with you. And we all know that a democratic society needs a citizenry who can think critically, and that's why universities are very important institutions for a democratic society. But at the same time, universities, access to universities or access to higher education should be democratized. Otherwise, we cannot talk a proper relationships between democratic society and the universities. So in the last 10 decades, we have had some challenges in terms of democratization of access to higher education, and we have some good stories, and we have some challenges that I think we should learn from it. So before I would like to share the last 10-year story, I just want to show you what was the situation before the expansion, before the big expansion. As you can see in this figure, number of applicants from in the year of 2000, it was like 1.4 million. But we were only able to accept only 400,000 of them. So about 1 million of students were not being admitted to higher education institutions. And we have a centralized system, both in terms of selection of students and placement of students. So these numbers pretty much shows the real situation in Turkey. And as you can see, although the number of admitted students has increased yearly, but at the same time, the number of applicants has also increased. So there is a huge imbalance between supply and demand of higher education. And while we were struggling with this supply and demand, we also had some political problems. And that had direct consequences for our higher education. So I would like to mention them briefly. First of all, we had, some call it a postmodern coup d'etat. So it wasn't a coup d'etat officially, but it was something we have experienced, and the military intervened with our political system and effectively overthrow democratically elected government in 1997. And after this memorandum, two issues directly related to higher education came to the front. The first one was the headscarf ban. Some of you who are familiar with Turkish politics may know the situation. Women who wear headscarf or hijab in Islamic terms were denied to enter into campuses. So although these students were admitted into universities, there are just students, but at the same time, there was a ban on wearing headscarf. So students who rejected to remove or take off their headscarf were denied to enter into campuses. So this was a really big challenge for us. I mean, many of the students, thousands of students, were denied their basic right, and this was all the time for the maybe last 10 years at the forefront of national news. All the time it was on the political scene. And the second issue was again related with the military memorandum. This was directly related with that memorandum. We have changed the university entrance examination. So we have created an inequality based on the types of high schools. So vocational high schools, we have vocational high schools, including religious schools, and we also have high schools. So this new system at that time in 1999, when it was introduced, created a dual kind of system. So basically graduates of vocational high schools, when they applied to a program, their central examination score were decreased. So although they have, let's say, the same score in theory with the other graduates, but at the same time their points were decreased. So again, this was not acceptable to the public, and public were, there were many demonstrations against it. But since we have a board of higher education, which is constitutionally independent from the government and is not accountable to the government, it's a kind of super board. It's not like board that we have seen in various states in the United States. It's a super board. It's a board over all higher education institutions, and even government cannot intervene their decisions. And in order to change it, you have to have a constitutional amendment, and that wasn't, politically feasible at that time. And even today, we haven't have a constitutional change. So again, this was an issue for years up until recently, and I will show you how we have solved that issue as well. And while we had this problem in terms of democratizing access, or we had problems in terms of access to higher education, the Board of Higher Education and universities actually formed an alliance with the army against the government. So universities actually were not on the forefront of broadening access or broadening academic freedom or rule of law. Actually, to the contrary, they were openly forming an alliance with the military. And this picture is very symbolic picture. I think it was taken in like 2006 or 7. And you see here former president of the Board of Higher Education and also various rectors of the prominent universities in Turkey. So they were forming an alliance against the government. And at that time, of course, we know that military was trying to overthrow the government. But thank God, they were not successful. They were not successful in terms of overthrowing the government. And as I will show you, this is just a picture of past now, because now we don't have any more clashes between the board and the government. And while we had this political conflict, when we were in 2006, there was a major shift in terms of democratizing access to higher education. The government decided to establish new universities. And the board said that they didn't want it because there is no necessary infrastructure. But the government said that, there is a popular demand, so we have to do something, so we will do it. They didn't listen board, and they passed a law in 2006 and established 15 universities, and all of them in less developed regions of Turkey. And subsequently, in 2007 and 2008, another 26 universities was established, again, in less developed regions. And in this picture, the red provinces shows the provinces which had already universities, in established universities, but the other ones shows the other provinces, they have had universities after 2006. So in 3 years, 2006, 7, and 8, all major, we have 81 provinces. Each of them has at least one public universities. And after that, as I will show you, the establishment of new universities will continue, actually has continued. But the major move was this, because in this way, the government effectively tried to democratize access to higher education. And of course, as you may guess, there were many reactions, especially from academics, from old universities. They said this is not a good move because there is no necessary infrastructure. These new universities are just signpost universities. They have a signpost, but they don't have the campus buildings, or they don't have faculty, etc. And there were many concerns about quality and finance. But I think it's proper to distinguish between two concerns. I mean, one type of concerns, yes, all of us has had some concerns about quality and finance. But some of the people were using this kind of legitimate, I think, concerns just to say that, we don't want new universities. So it was just a political, reaction against establishment of so many new universities. And from now on, actually, we know that there were very few empirical studies, and I will try to summarize just one example of one of our studies in the coming slides. And again, here are the number of universities. In 2003, we have about 80 universities, and now we have about 180 universities. So in the last decade, we have established 100 universities. And not all of them are public universities. We also have private universities, but there are non-for-profit private universities. And you see that their numbers also increased a lot. And you may think that why this is the case, because in 2008, after the change of the president of Turkey, one of the leaders of the former government, AK Party government, the Justice and Development Party, became president. So that president appointed a new board president. So there was a dialogue, open dialogue between the board and the government. And the board actually encouraged establishment of new foundation universities. Although we have had many great corporations, big companies who wanted to establish a non-profit foundation just for establishment of new universities, but the board didn't want to establish new ones. But after 2008, there was a more positive reactions from the board, so they openly encouraged them, and that's why their numbers also increased. And of course, from a financial sustainability perspective, it makes more sense to encourage them to open new universities, because unlike public universities, they charge a lot of tuition, and up until now, we haven't had any crisis in terms of their financial stability. But public universities until recently charged only a nominal fee, but after 2013, again the government just removed the tuition fee as well. So that might be an interesting story as well, because most of the countries introduced tuition fees, and but Turkey, while trying to increase the access, at the same time just removed the tuition fees. And there might be some concerns about the sustainability, and I will come to that point later. And how about the number of students? So in about 10 years, our number of students jumped from around 2 million to 5.5 million. And there were three major sources of this increase. One of them is just the increase number of available seats at the existing universities. So they were trying to increase their own capacity. And the second one is the establishment of new universities. They just established their programs very rapidly and then started to admit students. And the third one, this is tricky, is related to open education. We have an open education system similar to Open University of UK. The trick part is this. I mean, in 2004, we have about less than 1 million open education students. So these are not just face-to-face students. There are also open education students. So about 1 million of them were open education students. But now that number also jumped around to 2 million. So we have about 2 million open education students. And open education in Turkish case, at least, it might be different in other countries, the education quality is not considered as high as campus or face-to-face instruction. So that number, the increase in that number is a little bit interesting. My own explanation is because there is nominal tuition fees for open education, and also there are great benefits attached to it because, for instance, especially for males, you can defer military service by just signing up into one of the programs. And also, if you finish, if you are able to graduate in one of those programs, you can shorten your military service. So there are great benefits to attach to it. Also, it's an opportunity for many people who didn't have the opportunities in the past. So many people who are mostly older people would like to just get a higher education degree through open education, and it's very convenient, very cheap. So they just sign up. And in terms of the number of faculty, there is also an increase, and it was like 80,000 10 years ago, and now it's around 140,000. Of course, this increase is, if we compare to number of students, is less increase. I mean, this increase around like 75% increase, but in terms of the number of students, we have had 150% increase. So what happened is student-faculty ratio has increased a little bit. So in this graph, I try to show it into two categories. Let's just take this one. Students per faculty was around 17, and now it's around 21. So there is some considerable increase. And also, in terms of the faculty per with PhD, because we have two categories for faculty. I mean, we have lecturers and others, etc. We also have a faculty position like assistant professor, associate professor, and full professors. If we count only those people with PhD, it's around 48, and that number has jumped from 44 to 48 as well. And just to give you an idea, this number, OECD average, is around 15. So we have we need a faculty shortage. I mean, at least if you compare, internationally, data shows that we need faculty. Also, we know from experience from our own campuses, there are lots of complaints that we need more spaces, we need more faculty. And just according to one estimation, we need another 45, at least 45,000 new faculty just to reach to the OECD average in terms of the student-faculty ratio. And all is said, and in terms of the gross enrollment ratio, you see Turkey was around, gross enrollment ratio of Turkey was around 30%. Now it's more than, it's around to 70%. Actually, these numbers, since UNESCO publishes only until like 2012, but when they update their databases, when they include data from 2013 or 2014, Turkey's gross enrollment ratio will be around the average of developed countries. So let's look at the net participation. I mean, in gross enrollment ratio, you include, older students as well, and that may not be, a correct picture in terms of showing the access to the, especially new graduates of high schools. In terms of net participation, actually, it was like 17% of the 18 to 22 years of old age, and now it's 39%. So there was again about 150% increase. Now we know that at least one of the two graduates of high schools, new fresh graduates, are able to go to the college. But 10 years ago, it was like 1 out of 4. So in terms of providing access to higher education to high school graduates, the access has increased very rapidly. And how about the budget? I mean, you may think that numbers are, shows a very rapid increase in terms of participation into higher education. How about the finance? Actually, when we look at the absolute numbers in Turkish liras, we show that the government has invested higher education a lot. I mean, 10 years ago, although we spent around 5 billion Turkish liras, now we spend around 17 billion Turkish liras. But of course, this very much relates with the booming economy of Turkey. I mean, Turkey's GDP has increased, so they were able to, provide more education for money for education. But I think the correct comparison would be the budget allocated to higher education institutions within the overall central government budget. And when we look at the higher education budget within the overall central, government budget, we see that it was like 3.3, and now it's 3.9. So although government increased the number of higher education institutions, at the same time they tried to increase, and they increased the finance available to higher education institutions. And also, in terms of the GDP as well, the budget allocated to higher education institutions, that this is just a budget for higher education institutions. It doesn't include private spendings or any other spendings related to private credits or loans, etc. This is just money directly allocated for higher education institutions. And within the GDP, it was like 0.8. Now it's around 1%. So as the GDP has grown, both the ratio has grown and the absolute, budget has increased for higher education. And in terms of the internationalization, there has been also some efforts in terms of internationalizing of higher education. And again, if you look at the last 10 years data, we have like 3,600 international faculty, and that's like around 1.8% of all faculty. And if you compare to this number to US case, that's of course very small, but at the same time, the trend is very positive. I mean, there is a clear effort to internationalize higher education. And in terms of students, there is also a modest increase in terms of the share of the international students. It was like 0.7%, but now it's around 1%. And numbers jumped from like 15,000 to 55,000. So we have around 55,000 international students. Actually, today I have just checked the new numbers. Now this number will increase around 70,000 students. And about half of them, I have to mention this, half of them are, I think, government scholarship, on government scholarship. So there is a government scholarship for international students, and many of the students from especially Middle East, Northern Africa, and Central Asia are applying to that scholarship, and they come to study study higher education. And but campuses are more, in competition right now to get more international students. And as we have said, I mean, there were two main issues when, we were in 2000, 2003, 2005. One of them was related to ban on wearing headscarf, and the other one is was related to unequal treatment of graduates of vocational schools, and both of the issues have resolved completely. And now, I mean, everybody can apply to university on an equal par, and also can get higher education without any, ban. Of course, that doesn't mean that there is no any other problem in terms of democratization of campuses or universities or higher education system. But I am just trying to focus two main problems that were, for years, almost torn the country into two parts. And these two issues has been resolved. And just, I would like to give a summary of one of our study we just completed. We have talked with the 12 founding rectors of these newly established universities, and we asked them their experiences, what were the main challenges, etc. And just give you a brief overview. One of the interesting findings was related to administrative staff, especially administrative support staff. Many said that they could find quality faculty, but perhaps they may not come to their city, but at least there are available quality faculty within the country. But in terms of administrative support staff, since there is no program and they have had no experience, they have a great challenge in terms of finding people who had the right skills. So what they did, mostly they got from public officials from other public sector, and then tried to give them training so that they can work in university settings. And another finding was related to finance. I mean, we asked them whether the government budget was enough for their operations, etc. It's interesting. Most of them said that considering the limitations of the central budget, the budget allocated to universities was okay. But the problem was the budget allocated their individual campus is not related with their strategic plan. So, for instance, we have established 41 new universities, but almost all of them received about same budget from the government. But of course, some of them are relatively more developed regions, so they have more opportunities to attract more faculty as well as more students, so they can grow more rapidly. But that wasn't considered when the budget was allocated to these universities. This was their concern. And also there was some academic challenges as well. Like for instance, since in the past we have only had a limited number of available seats in universities, so all the seats, easily were taken by the students. Students would like to go to any program. But now we have expanded the number of available seats, and we have expanded number of programs. So students would like to choose among them, and they don't want to go some of the programs, which they see less attractive. So some of the programs are having real problem in finding students. So that's one of the new challenges of Turkey. So perhaps they have to either close those programs, or they have to just change the programs, change the curriculum, etc. But that's something that's very new to Turkish higher education. And lastly, there were some social problems. By social, we mean there were some local intervention by the local public officials into the universities. So there was some problems in terms of the right balance of the autonomy, and also there were some unrealistic, mainly economic demands from the people. When there is a new university in the town, everybody would like to work there, and everybody applies for a job, but they don't have the necessary right skill. So the rectors were having really a hard time, because they were receiving pressure from people, and as well as public officials to hire those people, but they didn't have the right necessary skills. And lastly, I would like to just wrap up with what I see as the 5 major challenges in our system. First one, yes, we have increased the number of universities. We have increased the capacity, overall capacity of higher education, but still we have a great unmet demand. And like for instance, if you look at the numbers in 2013, again, about 1 million of them were not being able to admitted into universities. The number is huge. So there is a great problem. Still, there is a great problem. But this problem is also related with the way we administer university admission. Because we have only one exam in a year, and we only place them once in a year, I think that is the source of problem. So perhaps there should be some flexible ways to get into colleges. But up until now, although the government and the board officials have in the past repeatedly said that they were going to make major changes in university entrance examination, but up until now they haven't. And you might think in 2009 there is a sharp drop. It's related with, at that year, most of the high schools didn't have graduates, because about 3 years ago, in 2006, high schools, although they used to have like 3 years high schools, from now on they had like 4 years high schools. So at that year, the number of applicants has dropped due to the lack of graduates of those types of high schools. And there were some types of high schools which were like 4 years, so they had graduates. 2009 was an exception. And again, since 4 years we have all discussed these ideological and political issues, we haven't looked at the other parts of the system. And there are great problems. One of them is just related to the types of high schools. As you can see, we have various types of high schools, and we have more. I just took 6 of them. And the red ones are selective schools. They admit students based on their exam scores for high school entrance examination. And the other ones just, they are just comprehensive schools. They admit all students. And you see their average math science scores in university entrance examinations, there is a great difference between them. And last year, what has complicated the situation is the fact that now all higher education, all high schools in Turkey admit students based on their test scores after the 8th grade. So that means that we will have more hierarchy between high schools. So all students will be admitted to high schools based on their test scores. So there will be a homogeneity within that school, but that school perhaps and the other schools will be much differentiated. And that's, I think, big concern. And at that time, I was a columnist in a newspaper, and I openly criticized this move, and I wrote, many articles. But actually, I told the officials in person as well. But they didn't listen, and we will see what happens with the recent change. And again, this is a map of Turkey, and this part is the least developed part of Turkey, southeastern part of Turkey. And I am from that part. My city is also from that part. And although we have established new universities in all parts of Turkey, their development is not still on an equal par. Still there is a great imbalance between regions. As you can see, in terms of the density of faculty, Ankara, Istanbul, and Izmir, large metropolitan cities, still have the most of the faculty. This part, the southeastern part, has about 10% of Turkish population, but only 2.5% of the faculty. So, although southeastern part has about 10% of the population, but they have only 2.5% of the faculty. So there is still a great, imbalance between regions, and so it's not enough to, just establish universities in less developed regions. You have to have some, other supporting programs if you want to just bridge between the, regions. And fourth of the challenge, I think is the most important challenge, is our pure governance model or pure governance structure. As I mentioned, we have a board of higher education, and it's a super board. And believe me, it's a super board because, for instance, you need to have a new faculty in one of your departments, and you'd like to, just open a position for that, and you cannot announce your, the position unless you get approval from the board. So board can either approve it or reject it. So all the time there is a constant, struggle between universities and the board, but the board has the final saying. All the time, there are constant struggles between universities and the board. And the structure of board, although it was modeled after New York and California, at least this is what was written in the literature, I think that's a misconception, because the way the board is structured, we have 21 members, and 7 members are directly appointed by the president. 7 members are directly are appointed by the government, and the 7 others are selected among the inter-university council, which means among the faculty or the senior administrator persons. But most of these 21 persons, actually almost all of them, are either academics or former academics, or they are current state officials. So it's not a lay governance model. It's actually a board of experts. And since it's a board of experts, they know everything, and the policy research component is very weak. Whenever they decide something, rather than making some scientific study or empirical studies, they just discuss among themselves, and they just announce the result most of the time. So that is one problem in terms of the board. And I have worked with the past 2 presidents of the board. I have been working with the presidents very closely. I was an advisor, so I know the board very well. So one of the problem was within the structure within the board. Also, the way directors are appointed is very complex. First, each faculty, assistant professors, associate professors, and full professors, has one vote. And of course, faculty, all the time they say, you know, this is our democratic right, and we should select our own rector. And I think this is a very bad model because, first of all, it has a lot of politics within the process, and faculty are divided within themselves. You know, let's say secularists versus you know, conservatives, or some kind of other divide in the process of selection. So I think this is not a good model, and many people are saying that it's not a good model, but unfortunately we haven't come up with a, you know, good alternative, so we have this model as of today. And lastly, we will have some you know, issues related to finance, because we know from the comparative international studies, other countries who have, you know, moved from mass higher education into universal higher education, they have had some, you know, serious issues regarding finance. But the problem is, since 4 years, Turkey had only an elite higher education system, and now still there is more popular demand for expansion of higher education. Finance is the least discussed matter. For instance, last week, actually 2 weeks ago, 3 new public universities were established, were approved by the parliament, and the finance was not discussed. You know, other issues, you know, whether there were enough faculty or other issues, you know, were discussed, but finance was not discussed, you know. And the reason, I mean, when you look at the US, if you talk with the public universities, whenever there is a discussion regarding a new campus or new college or new university, other public universities know what that means. It means that their public, you know, finance will be decreased. But in our case, we have had yet to, you know, come up with that perspective. Now, other public universities are silent as well. So there is no good discussion about the sustainability, and we will see what we will have. And I would like to conclude with these remarks. Thank you.
So we have time for discussion.
What has been the role of the Higher Education Board in the establishment and development of campuses? At least my sense is, from what your recent description is, that in fact there are pieces of legislation going through
Yes.
the legislature or the parliament, and things are happening
Yes.
without a sense of coordination. And all I will say, the final thing would be that inevitably there will be a process of ending that and mergers, but that would be in the future.
In the future, no discussion about the mergers, but in terms of the role of the board, I mean, whenever a new university proposal comes to the parliament, they ask the board, just for asking, you know, because, I mean, if there was a good dialogue between the board, I mean, the board writes the report, and, you know, they say perhaps this College of, you know, medicine would be okay or not okay, so College of Education would be okay, etc. When there is a good dialogue, that, you know, discussion happens. But in the past, we didn't have that dialogue, especially in 2006. So the government, you know, asked the board, and board said, you know, we don't want it. You know, government said, okay. They just passed through the legislation. I think the real problem is not the establishment. The real problem is related to your question. I mean, the board, up until now, has not done a good job in terms of focusing on what kind of programs or what kind of colleges should we establish in certain regions. I mean, whenever a university would like to open a new program, they submit a proposal to the board. And I mean, unfortunately, I don't think those reports are very, you know, scientific. They say there is a great demand for this program, or they say, if you look at, you know, globally, this program is shining, etc. So they write a report, but most of the times, I mean, the scientific basis is not there. So that's why we've seen, although they have established many new programs in the last 10 years, they are now, even now, they are having difficulty in terms of finding students for certain programs. So there should be a more, I think, coordination in terms of what kind of programs should be established, and just from now on, what kind of policy development should be provided to universities, or how that process can be reformed so that we could have a better match between the demand and supply.
Curious about the cost of attendance for a student at both the public and the nonprofit, including their living expenses, and if there's the concept of student debt upon graduation like we accept here.
I mean, after 2013, tuition fees was removed by Erdogan, our current president, just before the election of presidency, and so they don't have any big problem in terms when we compare to United States in terms of getting education, but the real problem was housing, because since there was no planning of establishment of so many new universities, they didn't have the necessary housing available, especially in those cities. So what we have seen is housing prices went up very rapidly, and people were happy. I mean, local communities were happy, but at the same time, I mean, whether it was a good policy or not, that's open to discussion.
I have a question about the international students. Since there are such a high demand for Turkish students for places, the idea that the government is encouraging so many international students for no cost seems curious.
No, there is fee for international students.
I thought you said that many of them are on a special
yes,
scholarship.
About half of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, many countries encourage international students as a source of revenue.
Yes. There are two reasons. I mean, first of all, is public policy. I mean, or a correct term would be public diplomacy. I mean, Turkey is considered as a regional power, and has developed good relationships with other countries. So education is considered as a good way to improve links with other countries. So that's why, although financially it doesn't make sense, but from a political perspective, from public diplomacy perspective, it makes sense. And secondly, and this is directly related to the board, especially last 6 years when I was working for the board, I mean, all the time, I mean, we were pushing for internationalization, because we think, I mean, internationalization is a good way to improve overall quality. I mean, when you have international students in your classes, when you have international faculty among your faculty, I think that's a good way of just improving overall quality.
Could you just say something about the Syrian students who have come to your country as immigrants?
I mean, right now we have more than 1 million refugees from Syria, and but their numbers have yet to show in these numbers. I think only just maybe 2,000-3,000 of them are Syrians among these numbers. But in the coming years, that number will increase, I am sure. And up until now, the general policy of the government was to think them as guests for a temporary time. But situation in Syria, and it seems that they are not guests; they will stay in Turkey. So now there is a shift of government policy. So they establish schools for children. So they are trying to provide more education, and they admit Syrian students into higher education institutions. And there are and there will be new programs in Arabic in several universities. And actually, I wrote one of the articles, and I was proposing to establish a new university in which the medium of instruction would be Arabic, because there are so many Syrians, and they should, I think, have a right to get higher education.
Two questions that I think may be related. First, I may be confused that you said that from now on, admission to high schools will be solely by test exams.
Yes.
Does that mean that substantial amounts of students aren't going to high school or going
All
to
of them
much?
go. All of
But
them
they're
go.
going to less
Yes.
selective
Yes.
high
Yes.
schools?
Yes.
And so that, I think, ties into the second question. You've talked about universities. Now, in this country, we have universities, but we have colleges,
Yes.
and we have the largest segment of higher ed is community colleges.
Yes.
Do you have that kind of range? Is that growing? Is there thought about that?
We have 2-year programs similar to community colleges, and they are part of university system. So one university, let's say you have one university, but within that umbrella you have 3 or 4 or more vocational schools. So there are 2-year programs, and similar to United States, they can transit from 2-year programs into 4-year programs, but they are part of university system. There are only 6 kind of community colleges independent from universities. There are, all of them are non-profit higher education institutions, but their size is really just small compared to other universities.
You mentioned the Open University
Yes.
is taking a substantial amount of the enrollment. Could you say a little bit more about how that Open University works? Is it similar to the British Open University? What do students do? Is there any back and forth with faculty?
I mean, in order to understand the Open University, again, we have to go back to this imbalance between supply and demand. Open education was established in 1980s. Again, at that time, there was limited access to regular or face-to-face higher education. So it was a kind of second channel for those people who were not admitted into regular programs. And for years, in 80s, in 90s, it works pretty much as the last resort for those students who were not being admitted into the face-to-face programs. So as a last chance, they had to go to this open education. So open education from the beginning had a serious issue in terms of the image and public, within the public eye. But since it's backed by the government policy, the graduates are entitled to the same rights with the other programs graduates. So that's why the program has been sustained. And now there are more interactions between students and instructors, but it's just for those students who would like to go to and use those online services. And majority of them do not use it. But the program tries to update itself. Actually, they have perhaps the best textbooks, perhaps the best multimedia courses or course materials. But again, with this huge number of students, I think the system should be reformed. But unfortunately, up until now, the board hasn't decided to do anything, or the government has not, planning to do anything.
Thanks for the lecture. So there are 2 questions, and they're very different from each other. The first goes to something you talked about earlier, and that goes to how curricula are developed. Thank you. So you mentioned that there is, on the national level, the governmental policies are put in place intended for purposes of getting people to be sort of more internationally oriented. So I imagine that would imply not just the political side, but the trade side as well.
Yes.
I was wondering to what extent, like, curricula support that, like international trade, things of that sort. And then we have other things in a broader context, like IT work or things of that sort that are just big in the world. And to what extent is a demand for that, and how does that correspond to the national policymakers? And the second question is really different, and that goes to Kurds. and that's the extent to which they're integrated into the university systems and how
Okay.
is that distinction
Yeah,
made between regular.
let me start with the second one. It's easy. I am myself a Kurd,
Okay.
so they are fully integrated. But the problem is there is a regional, imbalance in terms of the development among the regions. So the parts that Kurds mostly live, which is this part, southeastern part, is less developed regions of Turkey. So their access to quality education is limited. But in terms of the legal structure, in terms of the university entrance examination, I mean, they don't have any problem. I mean, they can go to the top schools. I mean, like I'm a graduate of Middle Technical University, which is considered as perhaps top university or one of the top universities. So structurally, there is no problem. But within the regions, there is a huge imbalance. So that's why we have that problem. And the first one, in terms of the curricula, I mean, we have two kinds of programs. We have Turkish programs, we have English programs as well. So when they come to English programs, I mean, of course, their curricula will be more internationally oriented. But in Turkish curricula, we have, I think, some problems. And also, those students, even international students, are taking some courses which are controversial for Turkish students as well. Like we have Atatürk's history course, which is just kind of an ideological course for Turkish students as well. So we teach that course to international students as well. So, I mean, when you aim to internationalize, you have to question this kind of, practices.
First, just a little point. When you divide the number of faculty into the number of students, you actually get figures different to that report. You get it going up from about 25 to about 38. I'm just actually pointing this out as a, that's it. It actually averages out to that. But my question is more actually about.
So you mean this number? 21?
Total. If you divide total number
Yes.
of faculty.
But you should exclude open education. We exclude open
Okay.
education. It's a separate system. We only calculate just face-to-face students and face-to-face faculty. When we accept one open education program, one university.
Okay. It obviously there are various ways of massaging the figures, and countries do sometimes like to portray themselves as in certain ways. My question is more to do with the in what sense your administrative system is modeled on the University of California. And I am not from here, but my impression is that you have a board of regents which are essentially picked by the governor, who technically have control over curriculum and set fees and have actually a lot of power.
Yeah, I mean, setting fees is something that government does. But aside from that, all governance issues are taken care of by this board. And I mean, when we compare this model to California model, it's really different, because in UC case there is only one university. I mean, legally there is one university. I mean, there are 10 campuses, but there is only one university, and within that university you try to just replicate or increase the number of campuses. But in this case, we have 180 universities, and even including the private ones. So that's why I said this board is more could be considered as a super board. I mean, if you remember the 1960 master plan, if you remember the discussions, especially from John's book, I mean, there were some discussions whether we should, in California, whether California should have a super board. But that idea was rejected, on purpose, because they said that super board would be too powerful over 3 segments of the higher education. And that's why they created a weak system. Yes, there were some shortcomings of that system as well, what we know as CPAC, and perhaps, little cooperation between the 3 segments. But in our case, although we have a super board, what's problematic is you would expect more coordination when you have a super board. But still, we have a super board, but our coordination is very limited. I mean, that's the problem, and that's directly related with the policy research component of the board. When you don't conduct research on what type of programs you should establish and where you should establish, how many doctors you will need in, let's say, 2020, etc. You have to calculate and you have to make some planning. But unfortunately, we didn't have that planning, or we have had planning, but still it was very limited. In my research, I compare Turkish higher education and American higher education, and I have seen the clear changes if you look at it historically. I mean, in the 60s, in US as well, the focus was on improving access. People of color were, demanding their right, and other people were demanding their right. So all the policy discussions were just increasing access, higher education for all. And we are in that stage. I mean, we have yet to discuss, let's say, graduation rates, or the efficiency of the universities, or sustainability of finance. So that's why I think my study will be helpful in the sense that we will face these problems. We know from US example at least. So let's be prepared.
With that, thank you very much, Bekir. I think we have learned much. We appreciate your putting it together for us.
Thank you.